Okay, so I've had a few people ask me about how to make this Pinewood Derby Cybertruck. This one was all CNC'd on a machine, so I designed the model and then CNC'd it out. So that's why it looks pretty perfect. So, but the key is that you can't make this out of just one Pinewood Derby block. Okay, this is, if you look at this width right here from this edge to this edge is the width of the block. Okay, but if you were to just use this, the wheels would stick out too far and it would just look goofy. So what you have to do is you have to add on this part right here and this part right here, and glue that on. And then also at the top, the height of this is taller up here than it is than this block here will allow. Okay, so what you basically have to do is you have to add on to the edges. You have to add on the edges, and you have to add on at the very top, like right in here. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do this. I did this one on a CNC, but I'm going to do this one on the bandsaw. All right, so first thing we got to do is we got to use 2 blocks. All right, so I'm going to cut the edges off of this. Okay, so I have my wheel wells. I'm going to glue them onto here, and then I'm going to cut some of the top off of this, and I'm going to glue it on right about in here, and that way I can get what I need out of the block. So let me trace the wheel wells on here. I'm going to go over to the bandsaw and cut that out, and I'll show you how to do that. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trace this wheel. I'm going to trace the arc of this wheel on here as the for the wheel well. Okay, and I'm going to do that 4 times at each spot. I'm going to do. Now, as you see here, whenever I trace that, see, I traced it with a little bit of an offset. So when I cut, it's going to cut a little bit more, so the wheel has some clearance around it. So when you cut it like that, you want to do that on all 4 spots, and we're going to cut it with a little bit of clearance. Okay, so now that I've traced out these wheel wells, the next thing I did was I went ahead on the top, and I marked out 1/4 of an inch with my combination square here, and I drew a line across here that's 1/4 of an inch. Okay, and what I want to do is whenever I go over to the bandsaw, I want to cut on this side of the line so I get a full 1/4 inch. Okay, and that's what's going to get glued on to the sides here. Okay, all right, so we're back from the bandsaw. You can see that I cut these out. Okay, cut the wheel wells out, and then I also first I cut it off of this block. Okay, you can see this this cut quality isn't like amazing. Okay, and so consequently the backside of this isn't really amazing, but it doesn't really matter that much, because what we're going to do is when we glue this on, we're actually going to glue this finished side in. Okay, so that way we get our wheel wells, and most of this is going to get either cut off or sanded off. All right, and so we don't really have to worry about that too much. Okay, so the next thing we do is after we glue this on, we got to glue on a piece on the top. Okay, one more thing I was going to add, before you glue these on, you can get in here and clean up these bandsaw cuts with just some sandpaper, and this was just probably, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds per spot. With just some thumb pressure and this is 220 grit, I think, and I was able to clean those up fairly well. But definitely do that before you glue this up, because otherwise you're gonna have a tough time getting in there and getting those wheel wells nice and smooth. All right, so we're getting ready for the final glue up. Basically, I've got the original block here, and then I've got the wheel wells that I've added on to each side, and then I added another 1/2 inch on the top. Okay, I was able to get that from the top of another Pinewood Derby block, and then a little bit of, I think, one of the sides of another block that I had lying around. So I was able to fill in that little gap right there. So once this is all glued up, we'll be able to trace our template on here, and then start cutting out the final design. All right, so the next day, this is all glued up. I went ahead and sanded it just to kind of like make sure that everything was kind of like flush together, like that this joint here was flush, This joint here was flush. So I went ahead and just kind of sanded it, sanded the end, that end. You know, it doesn't have to be like super square at this point because you're going to be cutting off a bunch of stuff off of it. So to get to the main profile. So so I got this template here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. This is 1-to-1 scale, so this will fit perfectly on here, and we will cut out what we need to cut out. And we're going to start with just cutting this profile. So we're going to like trace this onto the side here, and then we're going to cut out the profile all the way around, and we're going to start with that. That's kind of like the main thing that's going to get you looking like a Cybertruck. Obviously, adding the angles and stuff like that are going to get you a lot closer, but you can really take this in stages depending on how detailed you want to be with it. All right, so as you see, I've gone ahead and cut this out. I've put it on top of the block, and you see that I want to align the very front edge here with the front of the block. Okay, don't really pay attention to the wheel wells that much. You know, that's not really a reference point, but the front of the block is where you're going to want to reference off of, and then make sure that the shorter section of from the axle to the end, that the shorter length is at the front. Okay, obviously if you flip it around, it's going to look really strange. So so always make sure that this one is the front of the car, and flush the end of the template up with the end of the block, and that's where you're going to start. All right, so I went ahead and cut this out, and as you can see, that right there is already a pretty convincing Cybertruck. Okay, what I did was I went ahead and cut it out, and then I also went ahead and chamfered these edges, okay, over on the belt sander. This edge also, and then this edge I put in on the bandsaw. This side I put it on the bandsaw because you can see them down here. They're already on the template. Okay, and then these ones here at the front, these ones I did on the belt sander as well. So I just kind of held the block at a 45 degree on the table, flat on the table, and then moved it in to do that side, and then I flipped it, did another 45 degree, and moved in till it just touched that corner there, and touched that corner there. This one here, I went until it kind of developed equally on both sides. This one's a little bit less on this side, but you know, obviously you can true that up with just some hand sanding. So basically I just kind of like took the saw marks off of the rest of it from the bandsaw, took the saw marks off, and you could honestly run that as a pretty convincing Cybertruck in a Pinewood Derby. But the next thing to do is this body line right here. If you want it to really be convincing, that body line right there is very key. All right, so that's this line here. So as you see, if I flip this around and line this up, okay, that body line, it hits that exact corner. They all come together right there, and then it hits this exact corner right here. Okay, so that could be very difficult to do. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and try it, and because I've never done one by hand. I've only ever done them on the CNC. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this distance out here. I'm going to lay it out right here. So I'm going to know exactly how far back I need to go here and here. So when I develop this curve, or this facet right here, I can watch this corner, I can watch this corner, and then I can watch the line that I need to develop to right here. So I think it's going to be a little bit challenging, but I think I can do it on the belt sander. But you just got to be very, very, very careful, because belt sanders will take off just a whole lot at once. So let me get this laid out, and then I'll bring it up. All right, so this is what I did. I connected with a pencil from this corner right here back to this corner right here. All right, and then same thing on the other side, and that gives you that body line right there. Okay, so from that corner back to the back, I connected, and then what I did was this width up here was 1 5/8. All right, the whole thing was 2 3/8 about, and I went in 3/8 on each side. The difference was 3/4 between this and this, so I split that. I got 3/8 there and 3/8 there. All right, so I went ahead and made a mark at 3/8 in from the edge on this peak, and then 3/8 in from the edge on this peak. Okay, and then I connected from that corner to that mark, and then from that corner to that mark, okay? And then same thing here, from that front corner to the mark, and then from the back corner to the mark, all right? And that right there is what I need to take off, and it needs to be completely flat, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have to go over there to the belt sander. I'm gonna hold this thing up kind of at an angle. I'm gonna find where that angle is, and I'm just gonna very slowly whittle this down on the belt sander to be able to make this a flat that meets this line, and that line all at the same time, and the corners. So it's going to take a little bit of time, and you could easily do this with a sanding block, you know, and just on the table, like put a piece of sandpaper on a flat table and just sit there and just rub this thing back and forth. You could easily do the same thing. So, but I'm going to use the power sander over there, and then maybe finish it up all with a piece of sandpaper. So I'll bring it back when I'm done. All right, so you know, as you can see, that makes a huge difference. What I did was I sanded down and I stayed off the lines a little bit. You can still see the lines are there. So I kind of freehanded it on that belt sander and just kind of stayed off the lines. All right, so I still have a line to work to. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of paper. I'm going to lay it flat on the bench here, and I'm just going to work this back and forth on that edge, and flatten that out and try to work it down to the lines. It doesn't have to be perfect, man. I mean, the previous step without those facets was pretty convincing as a Cybertruck. So, I mean, this just adds to the effect, you know. People are obviously going to know exactly what this is as soon as they see it. So, yeah, let me do a little bit more sanding, and I wanted to give you a look over here at the bandsaw, or at the belt sander, and kind of what I've been doing over here. So when I when I put these corners on here, you know, I put a speed square right here so that I could just push this in at exactly a 45, and then same thing over here. I did a 45. And on these ones here, I just kind of freehanded them. I stood it on the nose end, because if you stand it on the back end, you know, this is not straight, okay? As you can see, this kind of leans over to one side, but this end here is still straight, all right? So what I did was I balanced it on the nose to be able to do these right here, okay? So I was able to go right in here, flatten that edge, turn it this way, balance it on the nose, find the flat spot, come in here, kiss that side, and that's how I put those edges on there, okay? And you're just gonna have to watch, like, you kind of have to, like, as you do it a little bit, you kind of have to tilt it over, kind of look and see how it's going, how it's developing, and then you may have to push a little bit more at the bottom or a little more at the top. You know, this one's pretty flat underneath there, but it will still cut unevenly, so you kind of just have to watch your line, you know, manually, and make any adjustments that you need to adjust. Also, same thing with this one. Whenever I went to go do this facet, I just I'm kind of watching it in this direction, I'm watching it in this direction, and I'm looking at my lines and just making sure my lines are straight, and then I'm coming in here and making sure that I'm working flat up to those lines, okay? And you can still see the lines on there, and you want to make sure that they're developing at all the same rate, okay? So you might have to adjust it kind of which way you're putting pressure to get that to, when you push it in there, so that it develops flat, okay? And then same thing on the other side, all right? So it takes a little bit of practice, but if you're slow and diligent about it, you can easily get it done. So you can see this is what I'm doing right here. I've just got this piece of sanding paper. It's sitting on an aluminum block that's nice and flat, and it's just balancing right now on that flat. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep working that back and forth on that flat, and just try to get that as flat as possible, you know, and go from there. So I did a little bit more sanding over here. Honestly, I just kind of did, like, I don't know, maybe like 10 or 12 swipes on each face. And, you know, the key with this is not to break any of the edges. You know, you want to keep all these edges nice and sharp. All right, you want to make sure that you're not rounding anything over, because the Cybertruck has just, you know, lots of hard edges, and you want to make sure that you're not rounding anything over when you're when you're doing this. All right, so next step in this process, I'm going to, you see I laid out the bed here, all right? And basically what I did was I just kind of drew a line that was parallel to the end, maybe by like 1/8 of an inch, maybe 3/16, all right? And then I went 2 1/4 inches from here to here, all right? And then I laid that out, drew another line. And then I used a combination square off of this edge to put in this edge and then this edge. And I just kind of visually went off of where it lines up to the edges. This one looks like it's the line's a little bit further off than this one, but I can compensate whenever I go to actually hog this out. And the way I'm going to hog this out is with a Forstner bit. So these are readily available. These drill a flat bottom hole. They do leave a little dimple in the middle. You know, kind of a small price to pay. You could always like use you know, wood putty to fill it in and then sand it down. But you know, like on a drill press, you can just go in here and you know, plunge down, move over, plunge down, move over, and just keep plunging, you know, go all the way around and then hog out the middle. And what you do is you set yourself a stop on your drill press so that when you pull the lever down, it only goes down to a certain depth and then stops. Most all drill presses have that ability. They have a depth stop on them, so you just have to play with that. And all right, so we're over here at the drill press. This is actually a milling machine, but it's you know, I'm going to do this by hand so you can see that it can be done on a drill press. So as you see, I've got a stop set here where I can't go down past there. Okay, so that's how far down this is going to go. You want to make sure that when you're going down in there, that you're not, if you're too close to the edge here, you're not going to break through into this wheel well. So that's kind of the only thing I want to make sure about, is that this right here, when you start to drill right here, if you go too deep, you can break through down here. All right, which is not a huge deal, but it's just something to keep in mind. Okay, so the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to like raise this up. I'm going to turn the spindle on. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to plunge. I'm just going to go down, kind of just work my way around from the inside out, and I'm going to work. I'm going to watch the edges, and then, or you can do it from the opposite. You can do from the outside in. You know, you can kind of go all the way around the edge, stay off the line, and then clean up the middle a lot faster. And then obviously what we're going to do is we're going to clean up the straight edges with a chisel after the fact. So let me show you how to do this. All right, so I went ahead and hogged all this out with the Forstner bit. Obviously, see, you still got all those little dimples on the bottom. Probably what I would do is afterwards, I would fill that in with wood putty and then sand it. You know, maybe drill down just a little bit deeper than what you thought you wanted to, and then fill it in with wood putty, and then you can get down in there and sand it. Obviously, if you don't have a mill, what you're going to do is you're going to go in here to the corners or to the edges, and you're going to use a chisel and you know, plunge down along these lines and clean all that up. So that's the way you would do it. I'm going to go ahead and put an end mill in here in the mill, and I'm going to put this in the vise, and I'm just going to clean it up. And clean up the bottom as well. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'll bring it. So that's all done. I went ahead and put an end mill in there and cleaned it up. Cleaned up the bottom a little bit, but you know, I'm not too worried about that. You know, this one, it gives it character. So the next step would be to paint this. The way that I did my paint was I painted the entire thing black first, because obviously you want the bed to be black. Okay, so paint the entire thing black, and also the wheel wells. You could also mask those off if you want the wheel wells to be black. I did not whenever I did mine, but you definitely want the bed to stay black. So paint the entire thing black first, and then wait for that to dry, and then you're going to mask off the windows. You're going to mask off the windows, and then use like a X-Acto knife to cut the window shapes and on the front. And then mask off the bed, so when you spray the silver, it doesn't get in there and ruin the look. So yeah, that's how to build the Pinewood Derby Cybertruck.